1. I live in a fairly rural small town in the northeast of England. It's surrounded by countryside and smaller villages. Because of this, there's very little serious crime. Worst that happened that I remember was a stabbing around 8 years ago, and in more recent years a friend of mine had the shit kicked out of him because he was full-on drunk, and 2 teenagers were looking for a punching bag. He came away with a bunch of bruises, but otherwise he was fine. This is just to give you a sense of the place I live, so you can understand the situation better. I live right next to the bad part of town, the part where the majority of crime happens. There was even one bloke that dumped half a rabbit on the doorstep of a corner shop as a prank, so it was a pretty rough area. Anyway, the downside to living next to this area is you hear a lot of things during the night. Having lived in a city for 3 years while going to university, I got used to the constant noise, the sirens, and traffic, so when I finally returned home to the comparatively quiet town, it took me a long time to readjust, which meant I heard a lot of strange things and on occasion saw things far stranger. So with my difficulty sleeping, after the first few nights, I lie in bed hopelessly trying to sleep. I should explain there are 4 mundane typical noises to hear in this town. The clock bell ringing every quarter hour, teenagers thinking they're cool, blasting music past their bedtime on the way home, teenagers in general being loud, drunks. Whilst failing to get to sleep, I hear voices. I go take a look out the window and watch these people walk past, pretty standard. Next, a drunk shouting about how he's gonna clock someone's head in. Clock is slang for punch. I don't know where else that is the case. And then finally, just before I went to sleep, a random man walking home alone, presumably after having a couple of drinks himself. A few days go by with more mundane noises, but then I hear a scream. It sounded like it was coming from a little girl. She sounded upset, like her mum had scolded her for something. I then heard shouting, and the screaming continued. Then both sort of trailed off and stopped. I suspected that it was just a really tired child whose irresponsible parent had kept them up far too long. It wouldn't be the first time I've heard something like that whilst here. So I continue on night after night, trying to sleep. Nothing interesting truly starts to happen until a week later. I'm playing Sims 4 at what would be around 1:30 a.m., and I hear a guttural scream, but I can't figure out where it was coming from. The sound was either reverberating too bad, or it was from the road adjacent, behind the houses in front of my own. Either way, I lost interest when the screaming stopped after several seconds, and I couldn't figure out where it was coming from. 2 nights pass. Once again, I'm playing Sims 4 when I hear screaming again. This time much closer, close enough that I should be able to see if it were nighttime. We don't have a lot of streetlights in our street, maybe 1 or 2. There's a good 20 meters or so between streetlights where it is pitch black darkness. I'm looking and trying to see things the best I could, but it was no good. Which brings us to today. I'm climbing into bed and I hear a bike ride past. I take a quick look out the window, but don't see any sign of the bike anywhere. But whilst I'm staring out the window, I see a man step out from the darkness in the middle of the road. It looks like he's just walking down the road, and I don't think there's an issue, until he stops in front of my house. I quickly turn off my lamp and hide from sight. The street lamp I mentioned earlier is directly opposite my house, so the light shines directly into my room, so watching from the darkness isn't an option for me. But it heavily silhouettes anyone not facing it. As I lean to see if he has gone yet, to my horror I see him at my garden fence, and I can only presume he's looking directly at my window. I panic and take cover once again, listening carefully for footsteps that would indicate he had left. After around 5 minutes or so I hear them, but to my terror, it sounds like he's just walked up the steps and into my garden. I'm too scared to look, but after mustering up courage and a strategy to keep myself in the dark, I do. He wasn't there, but I know what I heard. 3 footsteps towards the entrance to my front garden, 4 steps up some stairs, and finally 3 steps to the left and onto gravel. And yet he was gone. No sound of gravel or footsteps. I waited a couple more minutes, but I haven't heard any noises from within my house. We have a 1-year-old, very excitable dog called Dana that would bark the roof off the place if he came through the back, and I would hear him coming in through the front door because I'm directly above the only 2 entrances. and I would hear him either breaking a window or door. So I'm sure he's gone, but I don't know why he was here, and I can't help but feel like he may pay the house more visits. Update. I heard the footsteps and took a look outside and saw him walking out from beside my house and out of my garden. Looks like he's gone for now. Update 2. I mentioned what happened to my parents, and they got in touch with police. My parents believe he may have been casing the place. 2. 2 years ago, I had a somewhat epic night out with some girlfriends. We went out to a few bars, shots were involved, and we ended up out all night, dancing until the bars closed. We were 30 now, so nights like this were a very uncommon occurrence. I should also mention that I was getting over the end of a long-term relationship that I was in for most of my 20s, and was finally feeling like I was single and ready to mingle. At the end of the night, all of us ordered a rideshare to take us to our respective destinations. Mine arrived first, and for some reason, probably the booze, I decided to sit in the front passenger seat. My driver was very attractive, and I was tipsy, so I immediately started flirting with him. He reciprocated the whole ride. When he pulled in front of my apartment to drop me off, he leaned over and kissed me. I knew this was a terrible idea, but it turned into a mini makeout session. After what felt like 15 seconds or so, I pulled away and opened the door to get out. He asked if he could come in with me. I laughed and said no, then headed inside. I woke up the next morning to several texts from this driver. I must have given him my number. I started recalling everything that happened the night before. I did give him my number. Reality set in. I suddenly felt very foolish and embarrassed of my behavior, and doing something like that was very uncharacteristic of me. I kind of wanted to forget it happened, and thought my friends would have a good laugh about it, if nothing else. He continued to text throughout the day, saying how glad he was to have met me, and asking if he could see me again that night. I said no, and I apologized for my forwardness, thinking that he would see the situation for what it was. He then responded with, "But I have to see you," immediately followed by a picture of what looked like him holding my wallet. Panic set in. I hadn't gone anywhere that day, so I hadn't used my wallet. I ran over to my purse and frantically started searching for it, and sure enough, it was gone. He had my wallet. Now, one thing about me is that even on my wildest nights I have never ever lost track of my things. I have never made it home without my lipstick, let alone my wallet, cards, keys, or phone. It's entirely possible that it fell out of my purse during the ride, but I also had a bad feeling that he could have taken it at some point as well. It all just seemed too weird. Why did he wait until late in the day to tell me he had my wallet? He didn't say anything until I tried to cut it off. And why send an ominous picture of it? I didn't know what to do. I checked all of my accounts to make sure there were no unauthorized charges. Then I went into damage control mode. I knew I'd just rejected this guy, but I also needed my wallet back. So I kindly asked if he would return it. I also knew I could report it to the rideshare company, but I'd probably have better luck communicating with him directly. He agreed to come bring it to me. It was nighttime now, and given this situation, I didn't want to be alone when he showed up. I asked a male friend of mine to come and wait in the parking lot to watch and make sure nothing happened. He did just that, so I felt much safer. When the driver showed up, he parked in a way that I had to approach the passenger side door. I opened it, and saw my wallet sitting there on the center console. I leaned in to grab it, and he took the opportunity to lean over and try to kiss me. I pulled back, and when I did, the look on his face, it was a look that could kill. He was angry. I just said thanks for returning my wallet, shut the door, and walked away quickly. He sat there for a few moments, still looking at me the same way, and then sped off. My friend was close by, sitting in his car, watching this entire interaction. He was just as alarmed and confused by it as I was. My friend is an attorney, and he urged me to report this driver to the rideshare company. I was reluctant to do so because 1. I had initiated things and set the tone. 2. I participated in the physical contact. 3. I could get banned from the service just as easily as he could. He helped me realize that regardless of my behavior, I was intoxicated, and this man wasn't. he used the opportunity to his advantage. And how many other drunk women is this person providing rides for on a regular basis? How vulnerable are they? So I decided to report. When I went to do so, this driver was gone from my ride history. Either he had blocked me, or he deleted his account. I contacted customer service, but in reality, I had very little helpful information. They said they would look into it, but nothing came of it. I didn't pursue it further or follow up, mostly because I was embarrassed of my bad and drunken decisions. To this driver, let's not meet again. 3. This happened in 2009. I was 24 and worked as an office manager in one of the sub-companies of a big architecture and design consortium. We had regular staff in the office, and more designers and engineers working on the various construction sites the company was building, so they would only come to the office at the end of the workday or around paycheck time. Beside any other duties, I was also in charge of their work schedule, so naturally, when they would come, it would be me whom they'll interact with the most often. Most of the engineers were a bunch of middle-aged, seasoned men with a bit of a raunchy sense of humor, but harmless nevertheless. Then there was this new guy, Boris, who transferred from another city. He was in his 50s, different than the rest, but looked rather well kept for his age, kind of dignified and very well-mannered. He was a dead ringer for the actor Sam Elliott, which instilled even more of a respectful attitude towards him. The man was always extremely polite, his jokes were not cynical, and on top of all that, has recently become a grandfather. His son had a baby daughter, so he was very proud and happy about it, and would always talk about her and show pictures every time he visited the office. Everyone liked him, and I felt safest around him because he never made me feel like a piece of meat, unlike his colleagues. The project he was appointed to had foreign investors, so on this site worked a translator in her 30s. Her name was Vera. She was very friendly too, and even though we didn't often get to see each other in person like with the rest of the office colleagues, we would always be joking around whenever we had any interactions over the phone, or via email. Before the official Christmas party, one evening the engineers came around closing time and Vera was with them. It was one of those casual and relaxed times in the office, not only because it was the end of the shift, but with the holidays being near, it created that chill, friendly atmosphere. Boris was especially excited and suggested we all go for drinks in some pub nearby, because spontaneous gatherings like that don't happen often and there's no better time than now, etc. Despite his convincing arguments, everyone else was busy and declined. But I felt bad for him because I knew that he was alone as his family was back in his hometown. So in the end it was just me, Vera, and him. It was snowing heavily outside, so we ended up in a rather dingy, dark pub close to the office building. Initially, the evening was fun. We laughed a lot, discussing some work-related events and sipping red wine. As it progressed, however, I started feeling more and more uncomfortable because Boris, whom up till now I thought of as a father figure, usually so well-mannered and respectful, was giving off a very different vibe now. He was decidedly flirty, and the more he drank, the more aggressively he expressed it. What started with him staring at me with a rather predatory glint in his eye and giving me compliment after compliment, completely out of context, progressed into him somehow turning every conversation into sexual innuendo, and a way to show me how attractive he finds me, asking me questions about my personal life, etc. I said I wanted to leave and stood up, starting to gather my things, when he playfully took my hand and squeezed it so hard that my rings bit into my skin and it hurt me. He was trying to convince me to stay, and when it didn't work, they both decided to leave with me. Once we were out and started walking, the Christmas lights, decoration, and the streets bustling with people helped him to convince us to go to one more pub just for a while longer, because the night was young. And it was not often that we got to go out for drinks with colleagues like that. I should have listened to my gut and refused. But instead I let myself be convinced and agreed with a plastered friendly smile on my face, because back then I was so out of my element in such situations. I didn't really know how to react. I was afraid of direct confrontation and frankly uncomfortable and ashamed. The second pub was even darker than the first one. We picked a table on the second floor near a terrace overlooking the first floor. There was nobody around us there. He sat across from me, and this time he had no qualms to openly stare down at my chest. Even though I remember I was still wearing my work clothes, which are rather conservative, I was biding my time, hoping we would leave soon and at least calm that I was not alone with him. Because Vera was there, although she was kind of tipsy and giggly, and seemed oblivious to my discomfort at his constant hints and sexual innuendo. Then she got up and went to the restroom. Boy, did I cringe hard then. My whole body tensed, and he suddenly stood up and sat next to me, put his arm at the back of my chair and told me in a lustful voice,
"Come to my place tonight. I want you so badly."
I almost dropped my wine glass. I froze, feeling trapped because I was in between the wall and him. Didn't know how to react. Didn't have the guts to be flat-out rude to him, so, instead, I nervously giggled and said, "Oh, well, I'm flattered, but can't do that." He seemed to take it as me merely playing hard to get, so he upped the ante and caressed my hair, leaning even closer, whispering to me,
"Come. I promise to make you feel incredibly good. I know how to please a beautiful girl like you."
And then he licked his lips suggestively. I almost puked. I tried to gently push him away from me, but he didn't move until Vera came back from the restroom in what felt like hours later, but was probably maybe 5 minutes. When I saw her, I felt both relieved yet also ashamed because of what she would think when she saw him so intimately close to me in her absence. I suddenly jumped so quickly I pushed my wine glass and spilled the rest of the wine on the tablecloth. I declared I want to go home, and I don't care if they're ready or not. They protested, but in the end agreed to go with me, because it was very late, so I wouldn't be alone outside. Frankly, I just wanted to get as far away from him as possible, but there he was, acting like nothing happened, helping me with my coat like a perfect gentleman without me being able to protest, as he was first to the coat rack. And when I had my coat on, he once again used that moment to lean into my ear from behind and whisper,
"Come. Please come with me. I'm hard for you all evening."
And pressed himself to me enough for me to feel the proof of his words. I started climbing down the stairs, and the chilly winter air felt like a relief. There were no taxis in sight, so I was forced to walk to the bus stop with the two of them, her chattering obliviously on one side of me, and him on the other side, constantly pulling at my hand or touching me, trying to get my attention and mouth come with me secretly, if I looked at him. When we reached the bus stop, the bus that came first was that of Vera, so it meant I would have to remain alone with him. Instead, I decided to catch the bus and then get off at the next stop and call a taxi there. He didn't expect me to go with her, though, so he made one last attempt to grab my hand and make me stay, but I pulled it away and got on the bus. When the bus doors closed, I started shaking and felt like crying. I told Vera what happened, but to my dismay, she was rather dismissive of it, saying that he is a good-looking man for his age and I could have had fun with him. Then she admitted that he was always talking about me, and all the other engineers at the construction site were aware of his crush on me. They were even teasing him about it. She said that he actually wanted to organize such an event of going out as a pretext to get me alone at some point and try his luck. I felt disgusted. Even more disgusted when the text messages started. He professed his obsession with me. He was pleading with me to agree to at least meet with him one-on-one for drinks. Said he didn't want to scare me, blah blah. This lasted for a week or so before I realized I could just block his number, although I was dreading the inevitable next time we would meet in the office. I confided in another colleague from the office, who also happened to be the niece of the big boss. And this time I was taken seriously, especially after I also showed her the messages. I didn't see him the whole week. Then, after the holidays, I learned he went back to his hometown. Not sure what exactly happened, or whether or not he quit or was sacked, but to my relief I never saw him or heard from him ever again. I'm sure some people are outraged over Vera's reaction, and I wanted to say this is not the first such female reaction I've experienced. When I was almost 18, but not yet officially, I was chosen alongside two of my classmates from our high school to accompany children from an orphanage for 2 weeks to a German high school in Berlin. It was part of an exchange program. One of the social workers who was responsible for the children was rather friendly to me and treated me as an adult, even though she was in her 30s and I was 17. Then one afternoon she was late, and she later confided in me that she had slept with one of the 2 drivers of our bus. It was a bus specifically appointed to our group to drive us around, and she suggested I should try it with him because he was really good with his mouth. I will never forget her exact words because, even though it didn't quite dawn on me why this was wrong in so many levels for her to blurt out to me, it still felt so. So guess not all women are prone to solidarity and empathy. There are those who can be predatory and solicit instead of help and protect. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 417. Ugh, it's hot. Apparently it's only going to get hotter later in the week. Melty Freezer rides again. Even the dogs are angry about it, you hear them? Okay, I'm going to have a slightly busier week than usual this week because I do have Glitch Monthly #1 coming up on Thursday. I currently only have about 10 stories of the 20 I need, but I've got a few days, so we should be alright. Fingers and toes crossed. Just be careful you don't fall over. Okay, and with that I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.